E muito boa tarde a todos. Vou passar a palavra primeiramente para iniciar essa palestra com o professor James Cunningham, para tanto o presidente da FAPES como para o diretor de inovação da FAPES, que é a Fundação de Amparo à Pesquisa, aqui do Estado do Espírito Santo, para darem suas palavras iniciais. E, em seguida, vou passar a palavra para Rodolfo Rangel. Essas falas serão em português e depois, em seguida, virá a palestra, que será toda em inglês. Então, por favor, Rodrigo, Elton, fiquem à vontade para suas
Obrigado,
falas iniciais.
Cecília. Obrigado, Cecília. Muito boa tarde. A minha câmera eu acho que não está aparecendo para vocês, né?
Não.
Não sei se é porque eu vi que foi citada a cidade de Guarapari, eu estou em Guarapari. Não sei se é aqui o problema de conexão. Se não tiver problema, eu sigo da forma como estou mesmo, ficaria só o áudio. Eu estou tentando no celular e no computador, nos dois, não está aparecendo a minha imagem. Mas eu sigo. O Elton está aparecendo, é o mais importante. Elton depois,
A,
né,
pes-
Elton?
a pessoa do Rodrigo, eu estou enxergando aqui, Rodrigo.
Ah, você está me vendo?
Te vendo, mas uma outra câmera sua não estou vendo, não.
Ah, mas você está me vendo aqui então.
Sim, você está presente aí, só tem uma câmera apagada sua.
Ah, não, claro. Perfeito, Anilton. Perfeito. Então vamos lá, muito rapidamente.
Good
Novamente, muito
evening,
boa tarde.
good afternoon.
Uma satisfação participar de mais uma reunião da nossa rede de NITs, né? Agradecer primeiramente ao time da FAPES aqui, na pessoa do diretor de inovação Elton, né? Pela iniciativa que está sendo aperfeiçoada, né? Incrementada, enfim, amadurecida para a gente poder ainda conquistar mais resultados, né? Explorar cada vez melhor o potencial do NIT, né? Particularmente aqui hoje, agradecer ao Rodolfo, né? Que viveu essa experiência de NIT, hoje está fazendo seu doutorado e nos trouxe aí, né? Trouxe para a equipe da coordenação essa oportunidade dessa palestra, né? Então, eu faço um warm welcome to James Cunningham. It's a pleasure, James. We are really excited to hear from you, and I hope that we can learn from your personal expertise. We make international collaboration and learn from other experiences. It's a key aspect for innovation. So thank you again. E eu gostaria de fazer uma breve observação, né? Vamos dizer assim. Aproveitei esse período agora de recesso, meus 15 dias de férias aí que eu conquistei, buscando um pouco aprofundar, né, alguns estudos, até um livro que foi presenteado para a FAPES, resultado do trabalho de vocês, da equipe, Cecília, de vocês, da rede de NITs, né? E nesse livro ele traz um pouco o histórico dos NITs, um histórico que eu não conhecia. Quer dizer, a história dos NITs não é de ontem, né? É de 1981, né? Então, isso é importante a gente entender a história, a origem de algumas iniciativas, porque a gente consegue compreender por que, em alguns locais, o amadurecimento aconteceu antes, né? E outros locais tardiamente, né? Então, esse projeto piloto, lá em 1981, depois foi incorporado em algumas instituições que hoje, universidades que são referência, né, na temática, né? E, obviamente, nós podemos colher dessa experiência prévia, mas o que mais me chamou a atenção na criação dos NITs lá na década de 80 é que ele deveria promover a transferência tecnológica. Então, esse talvez seja o nosso maior desafio, vai ser o tópico aqui da palestra de hoje, né? A gente precisa conhecer um pouco a experiência de outros locais, como fazer, mas o NIT é central nesse papel de transferência tecnológica e articulação academia, empresa e governo também, né? A articulação das hélices, né, do ecossistema de inovação. Então, eu fiquei muito impressionado conhecendo essas experiências, esses relatos de experiências até em algumas empresas também. Começa pequeno, poucas pessoas, de 2 a 5, está lá no texto, mas que geram, né, numa visão de longo prazo, geram muitos resultados. E nós, FAPs, aqui falando pela FAPs, a gente quer participar ativamente desse processo e vamos juntos aí, né, Cecília, toda a rede, juntos, à medida que a gente vai avançando, ganhando maturidade, podendo de fato realizar toda a potencialidade desse instrumento, né, que são os nichos, tá bom? Agradeço de novo, mais uma vez, né, a oportunidade de participar dessa reunião e passa a palavra aqui para o nosso diretor de inovação, o Elton, que vai explicar um pouquinho mais aí o contexto, né, Elton? Toca contigo aí.
E obrigado, Rodrigo, pelas falas. Eu vou fazer um breve relato aqui das ações que já foram realizadas, né? Já foram realizadas pelos NITs. Antes de mais nada, é importante dizer que é um privilégio estar aqui, né? E ouvir a palestra do senhor Cunningham, da Newcastle University. Acho que é importante, vai trazer muitas contribuições aqui para o nosso ecossistema e todos que estão participando. Acho que é importante dizer que a FAPs, né, que para a FAPs, né, os NITs sempre tiveram e têm um papel estratégico na promoção de ações de inovação e transferência de tecnologia, né? Isso está bem claro pelo apoio que a gente tem dado nos últimos 4 anos, né? E muitas dessas ações da FAPs estão focadas nessas ações, inovação e transferência de tecnologia, né? E o programa de rede, o programa em rede, na verdade, dos núcleos de inovação tecnológica, os famosos NITs, tem esse objetivo. Só para recordar, esse programa em rede ele foi instituído por uma resolução em 2021, resolução 283, e está completando 4 anos de existência. E nesses 4 anos ele foi dividido em 2 ciclos, em que nós, inclusive, aditivamos, né, essa resolução. Bom, no primeiro ciclo, que foi de 2021, lá em abril de 2021 a março de 2023, várias entregas significativas foram feitas. Vou citar apenas algumas, né, para não ficar entrando muito em detalhe, mas a integração, uma coisa que era importante é que eram os 3 NITs estarem integrados, né? Não só entre eles, mas com as instituições onde elas se encontram. Então, elas e outras nacionais, inclusive, e internacionais. Mas tinham 7 instituições locais e nacionais, e essa integração veio se dando por meio de eventos, workshops, né? Também iniciamos a adoção de indicadores de desempenho, alinhados sempre com políticas públicas nacionais, como a Estratégia Nacional de Propriedade Intelectual e as diretrizes do Fórum Nacional de Gestores de Inovação e Transferência de Tecnologia, o FORTEC. Também ainda nesse primeiro ciclo, foi feito um estudo sobre a criação de um escritório estadual de transferência de tecnologia, o que nós almejávamos à época, e ainda estamos com isso em mente, e a elaboração de um guia prático sobre as formas de transferência tecnológica. E também, nesse primeiro ciclo, o jogo online, que foi criado, um jogo inovador, para disseminar o uso de patentes como forma de informação. Então, essas foram algumas das várias entregas que os NITs, capitaneados aí pela equipe com a Cecília, com a Nilton, professor Aires e eu nem sei mais quem está no NIT agora, mas era o da GIFs, né? Desculpa.
Humberto Brook.
Era Humberto, ele está ainda, né? Bom, mas no primeiro ciclo era ele. E no segundo ciclo, que vai de abril de 2023 e até março, né? Algumas entregas, como a internacionalização do programa, a gente tem dado esse foco dentro da FAPs, não só para os NITs, mas para alguns dos nossos editais, junto com o MCI, para que o nosso ecossistema possa ter ações externas, tanto levando os nossos inovadores, os nossos empreendedores inovadores para fora do país, como também buscando que outros empreendedores de outros países também possam se estabelecer aqui no Espírito Santo. Isso é bastante importante, essa troca de experiência, né? Também é importante dizer de parcerias que o programa fez com o ecossistema chileno de inovação na área de economia azul e sustentabilidade dos oceanos. Ainda nesse segundo ciclo, a integração regional em torno da economia azul e a troca de boas práticas com outros NITs que estão conectados ao Fortec. Ampliação de aproximação com o ecossistema de inovação nacional e internacional, criação de grupos de trabalho de estudo de prospecção tecnológica, captação de recursos e planejamento estratégico, e comunicação e marketing dos NITs. Então, esses são esforços, né, que vêm mostrar o impacto do trabalho em rede, a importância do trabalho em rede para a construção de soluções colaborativas, que elas possam gerar não somente valor para o Estado, mas também para todo o ecossistema de inovação. Mas a gente precisa evoluir, né? Nós fizemos uma resolução, essa resolução foi dividida em 2 ciclos, como diz, mas nós faremos uma chamada pública, não só para apoiar os NITs, que continuam trabalhando e tem muito trabalho pela frente, mas também que possam oportunizar outros NITs para entrar nesse trabalho em rede. Eu acho que isso é importante também, né? Acredito que essa troca de experiência nos permitirá fortalecer ainda mais as ações do programa e nos inspirar, né, continuamente na inovação. Então, boa tarde a todos, obrigado mais uma vez pela oportunidade de falar aqui e termino a minha fala.
Muito obrigada, Elton, muito obrigada, Rodrigo. Agora é com você, por favor, Rodolfo.
Muito obrigado, Cecília, muito obrigado, professor Elton, professor Rodrigo Varejão. Bem, sejam todos muito bem-vindos, então, para essa apresentação sobre as experiências e lições dos TTOs aqui no Reino Unido. É uma grande honra ter a presença de cada um de vocês para a gente poder compartilhar. Eu estou atualmente fazendo doutorado em Economia na área de inovação pela UFES e atualmente realizando essa cooperação técnica internacional aqui na Newcastle University, na Business School, onde estou trabalhando junto com o professor James Cunningham. Ele já está aqui do meu lado aqui, já preparado já para a apresentação. Professor James Cunningham, thank you very much. We appreciate your attention. Thank you very much. E nesse contexto, agradecer muito a FAPES pela realização desse momento, pelo apoio, e agradecer muito a toda a equipe aí da Diretoria de Inovação. Desde o início a gente vem trabalhando para que esse programa possa, né, o programa em rede dos NITs possa cada vez mais contribuir com a sociedade, contribuir com a transferência de tecnologia, que os NITs possam também se desenvolverem, né, com o seu grau de maturidade. Quero agradecer muito também a CAPES pelo apoio, e agradecer bastante a UFES, onde eu estou vinculado, o professor Robson Graça, meu orientador, está aqui com a gente, acreditou desde o início nesse projeto, sempre apoiando. Então, agradecer muito ao programa de pós-graduação em Economia e da UFES, toda a Universidade Federal, vários colegas estão aqui com a gente também, professor Anilton, a Agência de Inovação agora da UFES, que foi, né, remodelada, um novo momento importante. E também agradecer demais o pessoal do IFES, onde eu sou servidor. A gente tem aqui o pessoal da Agifes, o pessoal do Prof. e também é o Fortec, que é um grande parceiro nosso. Então, esses são os meus agradecimentos. Espero que todos aproveitem essa oportunidade, né, de compartilhar, anotem, façam perguntas, aproveitem mesmo essa oportunidade de estar aqui próximo do professor James Cunningham, e uma honra muito grande ter cada um de vocês, tá joia? Eu vou passar então de volta a palavra para a Cecília, e a gente segue em frente. Muito, muito obrigado.
Então, boa tarde novamente. É só para lembrar vocês que as perguntas, eu pensei que era no chat, mas não. Essa ferramenta é muito inteligente, ela tem o Q&A, que seriam Question and Answers. Então, todas as perguntas serão colocadas ali, podem ser colocadas em português ou inglês. Peço que todos deixem seus microfones desligados ou em modo mute. E vamos passar agora a palavra para nosso professor James Cunningham. Please, go ahead with your presentation. Feel free.
Thank you very much for the invitation, and thanks very much to Rodolfo for set it up, and it's been a great pleasure to have Rodolfo here in Newcastle in the cold weather. And he's experienced all types of weather in the last few months since he's been here. So what I want to do today is to share with you some of my research over the last 20 years or so that I've been looking at this very broad area of university technology transfer. I look at this area from, I suppose, three main areas. One, I look at it from the experience of the technology transfer office and what happens in technology transfer offices. I also look at the whole university industry collaborations from the perspective of the researcher. So how do they understand when they're sitting in a department? How do they understand the relationship, or what does the technology transfer office do? And then in a more broader sense, at a more macro level, I'm interested in how universities interact, collaborate, engage with industry actors, with government, with non-governmental organisation, and with sort of community and societal groups as they try and make their contribution to their region or place, or in relation to national sort of objectives. So what I'm going to share with you sort of today is really, I suppose, want to capture some of all of that 20 years in about 30 minutes or so. Really look at maybe what I see as some of the bigger macro trends that are happening, particularly here in this side of the world in Europe, but also what you can see from the US. Share with you maybe some of the insights from the literature, from my own experience around just university industry collaborations. Some of this you'll probably be very familiar with or might resonate with your own experiences. Some of it might be maybe slightly different. But again, you know, from talking to Rodolfo over the last number of weeks and months, it's very interesting to hear in terms of the Brazilian experience and where the whole system is at in Brazil in relation to university technology transfer. Then share with you, I suppose always it's challenging being in a technology transfer office is in how do you organize your resources. You have a number of different masters in a sense that you're part of a larger parent in terms of a university, but also you have to build a lot of relationships with academics, with outside the university, maybe with policymakers. So it's a very complex and sometimes a very messy sort of situation. So what I've developed is a technology transfer office business model framework, maybe to help maybe shape some of that thinking and maybe what you're doing at the moment. And then just finally looking at some lessons and reflections going forward. So first of all, just maybe I always start these with looking at maybe the bigger picture rather than maybe going straight down into looking at what's happening at the more meso level or micro level. Is okay. Well, what are the changes? What are the drivers? Making an impact or influencing the direction and of technology transfer offices and also university industry collaborations. Certainly, I suppose. Yep.
Professor Cunningham,
Yep.
it is possible that you change for full screen mode the presentation, because we can see the next slide. So that will be very nice of you if you can put in full screen.
I think in the 3 points.
Okay, so. No, okay, so you're seeing what I'm seeing. Okay, so now how about this? Okay, is
Much
that any
better. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you for Cecilia. Thank you very much for that. Yeah. So good. So what I see is maybe some of the key drivers of university mission expansion is, I suppose, a lot of universities, you know, here, certainly in Europe, obviously the US was one of the leading, is in relation to, well, how do you move from teaching research and then to embrace this sort of third mission? And what's driving all of that? So certainly in the UK, I suppose you have a big change in the financial models of how universities are supported. So maybe moving away from totally supported through public investment, through government investment, to very much having a mixed financial model. So there's maybe public finances coming in, there's private sector, there's obviously money from revenue coming in from student fees, particularly postgraduate students, and a whole array of revenue sources. Also, I suppose universities are under maybe increasing pressure to demonstrate, well, what are you doing for the economic well-being of your region and your context? And also in terms of, certainly in the European context and in the UK, there's an increasing pressure now to say, well, how are you helping and supporting societal problems and challenges? Some of this is couched in the grand challenges idea around poverty, security, information technology, all of those sort of things. And what does what does the university's role in that? And how does the TTO play its part in that sort of process? Certainly, I suppose, sitting in the UK, we're experiencing a lot of increased competition, not alone in a national sense, but also like a lot of universities, we're competing internationally for students, for research, researchers, and also in terms of talent, but also in terms of collaborations, all of those sort of things. Certainly, maybe you're seeing more change in terms of maybe running universities as more sort of businesses on a profit and loss basis, which is changing maybe the nature, the focus, the culture maybe of universities. And then that is having a knock-on effect in terms of, well, what does that mean for the individual academic, for those who provide professional service support, like technology transfer offices, maybe a finance function, whatever it is. So all of that is influencing sort of the overall mission expansion around technology transfer offices. Certainly here in the UK, and I would also say in Europe, there's a big emphasis on impact. So governments are spending significant amounts of money, be it euros, dollars, whatever currency, on public investment in science. And I suppose if you look at Davos conference there just last week, I was listening to an interview of the head of Novartis and saying that there's a valley of death, that we're investing a lot of public investment in public science that comes through universities, and we're not seeing maybe the fully throughput in terms of commercialization, and we're seeing in terms of new products and services that are supporting companies in Europe and elsewhere. So there's a big emphasis on the economic impact. For every pound that is spent or every dollar that is spent, what is the economic return on that comes through the sort of university system? So what is the impact in terms of job creation? What's the impact in terms of intellectual property development, patents, licenses, new startups, all of those types of agenda? As I mentioned there a few months ago, in terms of just the societal agenda, and I suppose particularly in the UK and also in Europe, is that universities now are seeing more than an engine of economic growth, but also in terms of having more active contribution to helping and supporting in terms of some of those wider societal issues. Maybe there's also the impact around public policy. I suppose what we saw around COVID, certainly in terms of this part of the world, is that I suppose a lot of university expertise was mobilized to support government responses, both in terms of scientific response, both in terms of how to in terms of behavioral dimensions of COVID, but also in terms of infrastructure around testing and just that broader expertise that that universities would have. So how is that shared in terms of public policy? And finally, then, in terms of just the technology that comes out of universities, how that is shared and the impact of that. Then you look at maybe specifically then the challenges of TTOs. And I think there's no doubt, and I think you probably feel it every day, is that it's obviously TTOs are seen as critical actors in sort of this interface between the university and the external environment. That sort of boundary spanning role in terms of bringing different maybe communities together and also maybe helping the university to realize this broader strategy around economics, social impacts, and all of those sort of helping to address some of those key drivers that are influencing university strategic direction, but also in terms of how they interact with their wider communities. But the reality is that TTOs have very much reliance on stakeholders for their performance. So if you need to have obviously a strong research base, you need to have maybe within your university, you need to have maybe good relationships with PIs, with scientists, with university management teams, and also with the external sort of world in terms of industry, local trade associations, all of that, in order to deliver a performance and to deliver your objectives and to do that year in, year out. And I think it was very evident, certainly from my experience, and if you look at literature, is that at a university level, you need top management of the university to actually believe and truly value what a technology transfer office does. Sometimes, I think in my experience and what you see in some of the literature and all of that, is sometimes maybe university leaders don't fully understand the role, remit, potential impact, the influence that technology transfer offices can have. And maybe have myths around that technology transfer offices have to deliver a profit, that they have to generate revenue, all of those sort of things. And if you're maybe well-established university, maybe that might be some of those may be true. But I suppose technology transfer activity in a university is a very labor-intensive, high contact, a lot of relationship building, and it takes time for all of that to take fruition, to generate a license, to support a startup, and to have all the impacts that universities may desire. And sometimes, I suppose, when you look at technology transfer offices, the challenge is how effectively to deploy maybe the limited resources that you have and what to prioritize. So do you prioritize maybe licenses because that gives you maybe an immediate, they're challenging to get over the line or to realize, but also they're maybe less complex to realize in terms of they're very transactional, very mechanistic in some ways. But you can really, really deliver licenses very, I wouldn't say nothing is very easy, but relatively easy in comparison to trying to support a university startup by faculty or by students or by graduate students. In terms of resource effort, is very much more maybe required for a university startup. And then you're looking at in terms of, so you have these pressures from maybe university leaders in terms of what to do. You have these external pressures from policy, from the local environment, and all that. So then I suppose, how do you manage your way through all of that? So I suppose what I sort of look at is maybe share some of the insights in terms of maybe what we know about university industry collaboration.
Professor James, sorry to interrupt you again, but somebody asked me to speak more slow to have more time for the interpretation.
Okay, so that's
yes, yes,
no,
we can follow very well your
okay. That is fine. That is fine.
Okay, thank you very much.
No problem at all. Thank you. So to follow up on the sort of bigger picture in relation to, well, how technology transfer offices, resources, what to prioritize. So then we sort of sit back and reflect, well, what do we know about university industry collaboration? And what do we know about how effective you can be in relation to technology transfer? So I'm going to look at maybe some of the wider conditions, maybe what enables effective technology transfer, what are the barriers, and look at maybe to reflect on the academics that technology transfer offices rely on for their success. So there's two different varieties of academics in relation to and their activities and how they support technology transfer. So this is so I'll share the slides afterwards with Cecilia and Rodolfo, so you can have a look at this. But one of the things that we have done is try to map out the start to finish of a university industry collaboration. So look at the inputs. So there's a range of those there. So looking at lots of different inputs from the literature and also from our experience. You look at the process of converting some of those inputs to realizable outputs. And then you look at the whole area around activities and outputs in relation to joint supervision, invention disclosures, licenses, university licensing revenue. And then you have the impact of all of that, so that the university can claim that it's leading in whatever areas, that it has all of these collaborations with industry and all of that. All of this looks great on paper, but we all know that technology transfer is a very complex, messy, and very contextually nuanced activity. So if you're in a large urban area where there's a lot of R&D activity around you, there is complexity, but the complexity maybe is different from maybe a regional based university where it doesn't maybe have the same environment where you have a lot of firms that are involved in research and development, or maybe you have as many researchers or academics that have an interest, or the collaborations or relationships with industry that you would have maybe in a larger urban environment. So just maybe this gives you a sense of just what's involved in terms of maybe thinking of the bigger picture in terms of the inputs, in-process activities, outputs, and the impact of what maybe is trying to be realized in university industry collaborations. So, but what are the conditions? What makes for effective collaboration between a university and an industry partner? First of all, is that if a business is engaged in exploratory internal R&D. And what we mean about that is that a business or an industry partner has an R&D function, number one, but also has some sort of experience around research and development and is engaged in that type of activity. Ideally, if the business is mature and large, so that would suggest that the business would have some resources, experience, competencies, skills around research and development, but also in relation to technology transfer as well. Thirdly, is that if there is very little IP issues between parties. So, and what this means is that there's no conflict. So it's very clear what are the terms for the university, and in terms of what are the terms agreements if you're to do an IP agreement. And it's very straightforward. There's very little transaction costs, and it's as pain-free as you can in terms of these type of activities. Also, if university academics or researchers are associated with a university research centre, so they're maybe a part of a designated university research institute or centre, because they're part of this maybe wider community that are coalesce around maybe it's AI or some aspect of in medical science or whatever that may be. And the last thing is, I suppose, the access, that it's easy to access university resources, but also in terms of maybe an access any of the R&D capabilities that universities have. So, but sometimes is that we know that small businesses don't have the resources, maybe don't have the experiences. You find also that maybe some academics, they don't have the networks, the experience of working with industry, or maybe the business acumen that allows them to see their research in terms of where there is the market potential for that. And this is where maybe some of the challenges then for technology transfer offices is that maybe there's reliance on, well, where do you prioritize your resources? Yes, if you're looking at conditions like that, great. So that maybe can enhance the likelihood of success. But often and not is depending on the context that you're in, is that you have maybe a very mixed profile of researchers and industry communities that you're working with. So it can be challenging in terms of trying to manage those sort of conditions for success in essence. So what at the macro level enables a very effective university industry collaboration and technology transfer? I think the research would show is that levels of investment in R&D in your region helps. Okay, so there's a base to draw on, or there's experience. There's a lot of maybe soft effects as well as the hard investment that goes in that results in R&D investment in a region. Certainly over here in the UK and in Europe, there's also a lot of investment around creating industrial clusters around particular geographic areas. And I think from talking to Rodolfo, I think something similar is happening in Brazil or is similar type of industrial policy. Some of it is emergent and deliberate by government, and some emerges as a result of serendipity and luck that these things would happen. But that also helps with enabling at a macro level sort of university industry collaboration. So the other two elements is that if you have obviously government and support in terms of public investments, an understanding of where a technology transfer system, particularly a university technology transfer system, fits in the overall system of university of innovation and entrepreneurship policy. And also, if you have public development agencies that maybe have a direct responsibility for supporting university technology transfer, so maybe supporting technology transfer offices, or in design of their programs that they're, I suppose, influencing researchers to engage with technology transfer offices in shaping their research projects that they're looking to get some funding for. And I suppose lastly then, I suppose, is that you have a very stable legislative and institutional environment. So there's confidence in the legal system, there's confidence in the sort of the wider working systems in terms of banking, venture capitalists, all of that wider sort of system, that there's a wider confidence in that, and that helps in terms of influencing, in terms of university industry collaboration. Then when you come at the university level, I suppose there's a number of different factors here. Firstly, I suppose, is there a strong research tradition or a growing research tradition in your university? So if I were to ask you, in terms of your own offices, can you name the top researchers? What sort of relationship does the office have with them? Do you have a very clear line of sight, understanding the emergent early career researchers that are going to be the maybe rising stars of the future? What research are they involved in? Is that sort of research tradition, and it's maybe going from the very basic research, but also the applied research, that sort of tradition and that. If you look at your institutional context, is this whole agenda of strategic importance to your institution? Is it there in a mission statement? Is it there in the university strategic plan or whatever artifacts that your university uses? Is it something that trickles through then down to the individual level, which I will talk about in a minute? Is there commitment at the university level? So is there someone in a leadership position at the university level, at the executive level, or the top management team of a university that has a remit and is in charge of this whole engagement, university industry collaboration? And is that commitment tangible in terms of the portfolio that they have and the sort of commitment and resources that the university has provided, in relation to that? Also, I suppose, the quality and the reputation of the technology transfer office. So sometimes, obviously, there's external measures of quality and reputation, but also there's the internal quality and reputation. So if I was to come into your institution and ask one of your researchers what is their impression of your technology transfer office, what would they say to me? Would they say, yeah, people are very committed, very, very responsive, all of those type of things. They also look at in terms of, well, what's the scope of your technology and knowledge transfer activities? So is your office servicing the whole university? Is it involved in all of the mechanisms of technology transfer, licenses, material transfer, knowledge transfer, consultancy? Is it involved in student enterprise projects, student innovation projects? What is the remit? What are the institutional policies? If I went into university and I was a new employee, or if I was just maybe an industry partner, is it very easy for me to understand, well, what is your institutional position in relation to intellectual property? Or if I wanted to start up a business as a researcher in university, is it very clear who I go and talk to? Is it very clear the process that I have to go through? Is it very clear in terms of who gets what in terms of ownership and all of that? How much is or to what extent is the inventor involved in shaping the technology transfer strategy in relation to their research or what they're doing? Is it very much a partnership? Or is it very much you, in terms of the technology transfer office, taking the technology, looking for an opportunity for a license, and with very limited inventor involvement? And then I suppose the whole area of trust. I think what you see in the literature, and certainly what I've experienced as well, is that you have to have a high level of trust between the technology transfer office and the researcher, and that. If trust is broken down, research is very quick to spread the word in terms of saying, well, actually, technology transfer office isn't great. And then you have a risk of technology leakage of intellectual property, or what's described as technology transfer going out the back door. So therefore, the university loses, and then all of those impacts and benefits that we would like to see in terms of university industry collaboration, all of that is lost. So that trust, so I suppose it's very, and that trust is at the macro level, and in terms of in a university, but also then when you come down at the individual level, to the individual researcher. And I suppose I've looked at, how researchers understand technology transfer offices understand this, is they will understand it when they will need it. So they're maybe putting in a funding proposal. Maybe there's an opportunity has come along and they say, okay, well, I want to maybe license this technology. And and then they maybe have an appreciation or realization of the value and what is the activity of a technology transfer office. What we find at maybe at the individual level, if you think of the individual researcher, is is there time allocated to actually supporting them to do this activity. So at the very start of my presentation, I said, well, actually one of the bigger drivers that we're all experiencing in universities is the changing nature of work. So maybe 50 years ago, or maybe 100 years ago, or maybe more, it was very much like teaching research. Now you have the third mission, or this whole impact, university industry collaboration agenda. So how is that allocated at a micro level to an individual academic researcher in terms of their weekly workload? Some of the research would indicate if they have prior industry and commercial experience, that also helps when it comes to technology transfer. So they have some understanding of the industry perspective. They have understanding of the commercial value and how all of this works. And also helps maybe they have some maybe commercial acumen. So they see maybe the market potential of the research that they are developing. So they can see maybe that it can be deployed in a particular customer segment, that can be applied in a particular context. They can see maybe that they're meeting a particular real need out there in terms of among business-to-business customers, or from a business-to-consumer customers, or into a consumer market. They might have maybe if they have some maybe technology transfer know-how and experience, so that they have maybe been involved in maybe through maybe working in a wider research team that is very much active in relation to university industry collaborations. So they get that experience picking up that knowledge. Also maybe through maybe some experiences they have with industry partners. So it might be research collaborations on a project, but they're building up some know-how and experience that way. Also, if they have maybe researchers have established networks, both academic, which probably they will have, but also if they have some very strong industry networks. Some of them maybe are at a local level or within the environs and proximity of their university, but also some might be much wider at a national or international level. So there may be some factors that can influence that. But think of, I suppose, I always look at, when you look at your strategy for technology transfer office, you have to make sure that the strategy meets the real experience of researchers. So if they're coming to you at a point where they need you, is that too late? Should you be developing the relationship with them earlier on? And maybe in terms of the training, development, awareness, and what we're seeing in a European sort of context, and certainly in the UK, is at PhD level, is that future researchers are being more exposed to this type of agenda. So they're getting modules, they're working a lot, maybe encouraged to work a lot more with industry partners as part of their socialization and formation, so that when they are engaging in this later on in their career, that they are better prepared rather than learning all of this on the fly or on the job when they have to do it, rather than having maybe much more of a immersive experience earlier on in their careers. So what are the barriers? What stops effective technology transfer? And maybe some of this is, you can resonate with this in terms of your own experiences. First of all, is maybe there might be a perception of a conflict of interest. Can't publish my paper because I'm trying to protect my intellectual property, because I'm involved in the university is looking to license my agreement. So there's perception of that, and maybe some of it are perceived conflicts of interest rather than actual conflicts of interest. There's also, in terms of, I suppose the second thing is that researchers will look at, I want to do an invention disclosure. It's too complicated. The forms are too complicated. I can't get access to it. I can't talk to someone. Those type of things, and the immediacy of access, and it takes maybe 3, 4, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 10 weeks, for universities committees, or who has the final say in terms of maybe approving or doing the due diligence in terms of the sort of technology transfer activity. Or if I'm looking at a university startup, and they see, well, actually, maybe a university wants to take a certain percentage of equity, that might immediately put them off. Or that there's no supports, or that they have to give up, or whatever it is, that all of that becomes or the policies become overcomplicated, and that just is a showstopper for some researchers. Also, I suppose you see is that there might be an over-evaluation of intellectual property that the university has. So the technology transfer officer might value a particular technology at X amount of money, and it might be well off in terms of where the industry valuation is. Trust is another barrier. So the trust between the technology transfer office and the researcher, and the trust between the technology transfer office and the industry, or the outside third party. So if that breaks down, I mentioned the tension between, I want to get on with doing my science, doing my research. I want to keep that going, but also I feel that if I'm involved in some of looking at technology transfer activities, that this would slow that down, or would impede or stop some of that. Also, the lack of technology transfer expertise, know-on, and support. So not only at the researcher level, but also when it comes maybe to some industry partners that don't have maybe the necessary expertise around, well, if they license the technology from a university, can they bring that into their business, and can they deploy that effectively within their business within a short period of time? Just the know-how around negotiating technology transfer deals around licenses, whether it's exclusive, non-exclusive. You look at negotiations around equity, first round, second round, seed funding. Just in relation to negotiating all of that, there's a know-how, there's sort of experience there. And also, I suppose, particularly from a researcher's perspective, is the support around just doing some of that sort of technology transfer. And the last sort of barrier is the power of industry partners. And maybe you might have experienced this in your own context, is that sometimes industry partners are very enthusiastic at a particular point in time for a particular technology or an area of research, and they're all really putting a lot of resources, energy, and effort. But the business interest and focus maybe over time shifts away from that area. So their power and influence and their interest in this wanes. And that changes in terms of the intellectual property strategy, but also sometimes, they might continue, they really see the value of what's being produced, and then they will try and exert their power as much as possible to get the best deal possible for, and at the lowest possible value or what they have to pay for it, and so therefore that can be a barrier in terms of technology transfer. But what I've experienced, I suppose, is the invisible, it's the unknown unknown, is around culture. I've experienced, and I suppose in terms of the research that I've done, is that, you go into some departments and this whole activity isn't valued whatsoever. You go into certain disciplines and you look at maybe in humanities and social science versus, those in the engineering, science, technology area, there's a significant cultural and disciplinary difference between their attitudes around technology transfer. So some maybe in humanities and social science would believe this is not what universities should be doing, and have a very strong values-based sort of objection, I suppose, or they would feel this is not what universities should be doing. And they would favor more knowledge transfer and being involved in maybe advocating rather than actually being involved in licensing or some form of hardware technology transfer. But also there's, as I mentioned, before, is that maybe lack of awareness of what is technology transfer, what is knowledge transfer, even though this is what we do in universities, but just in terms of codifying and the practice of that is, and also just a lack of skills around it. But to me, is around attitudes is one of the biggest cultural barriers, and maybe something that maybe you have experienced in your own context. Is there pockets where there is a very positive attitude, but also there's maybe wider, and that is also cultural barriers with university management teams as well. That because again, this is maybe harder and more difficult to understand and conceptualize what is technology transfer. Whereas if you said, okay, I'm doing research, I'm doing teaching, that is very clear, straightforward, and also is based on their lived experience of doing those type of activities if they're an academic in a senior leadership position. So maybe just to bring your attention to, I suppose what we're seeing is also there's new types and models of knowledge and technology transfer offices. So we have the traditional sort of technology transfer offices that you can see on your left column there. You have technology transfer offices that are coming together in forming sort of regional clusters. So if I look at the Irish example that some of my research has informed over the years, is that a lot of universities in Ireland are collaborating at a national level. So Ireland is a 5 million population country. You have about maybe 15 or 16 third level institutions. 20 years ago, you didn't have many technology transfer offices. Now you have this initiative called Knowledge Transfer Ireland, where there's a common, there's a lot of collaboration between technology transfer offices in universities, and also there's common agreements that they all have. So they're all with a view of reducing the transaction costs and some of the barriers that has been maybe that I just talked about there in relation to working with industry. Also, you have these virtual technology transfer offices as well. And also you have, I suppose, also these digital knowledge transfer, technology transfer offices that are working with a whole lot of different universities and don't have any physical presence whatsoever. So they're investing a lot in sort of technology and that. And I suppose that is, I think will cause maybe some future tensions with existing technology transfer offices. And I think one of the big, I suppose, drivers also is in terms of the digitalization of the technology transfer activity. So a lot of the mechanics of doing an invention disclosure, of doing IP evaluations. So a bit like looking at property valuations here in the UK, you don't have someone physically coming out to your building and walking around and doing a property valuation. All of that is automated now. You can see the same type of thing happening with the technology transfer office activity. to do with some of the process activity of technology transfer offices. So this is going to raise some interesting sort of questions and dilemmas for technology transfer offices that are more traditionally based in terms of how to embrace that type of digitalization, and then where to invest their resources and activities. So we've looked at some of the conditions, we've looked at some of the enabling factors that stimulate technology transfer, we looked at some of the barriers. I've sort of highlighted the importance of culture and working with people. And I suppose it's to look at in terms of the profile of academics that work in your institution. So we did a systematic literature review, so looking at the existing literature and saying, well, there's actually two types. So sometimes we think of researchers or academics, they're all the same. When it comes to university industry collaboration, they're not all the same. There are academics that are very much interested and motivated in relation to the hard technology transfer, which is around research commercialization, licenses, technology transfer, activities around startups, material transfer, and all of those type of activities. So that would be what I would say as the academic entrepreneur, so who tends to technology commercialization. And then there's entrepreneurial academics that are out there that are engaged with industry. Maybe they're through maybe student projects for their modules or their degree programs that they're working. They might invite industry partners to come in and maybe talk to their students about careers, or about maybe if they're in manufacturing or in their marketing, final year degree or whatever it is, they might have maybe some industry involved in some mentoring. But as an office, you're focused on the academic entrepreneur. So when you look at the broader channels, okay, you're very much focused on those academic entrepreneurs that are interested in contract research. They're interested in the hard technology transfer office. Sometimes your university leaders and managers are wanting your office to be involved in supporting entrepreneurial academics. And some of that crosses over with sort of the teaching mission of a university, as well as the research mission. So this is where having a very clear sense of who are the I suppose, again, as I said to you at the very start, you're very much dependent on others for your success. So how many academic entrepreneurs really in your institution are you really dependent on for your success? How many of those are realistically going to have an interest? How many of those are you actually engaging with? And what is the pipeline like, or what is the profile of those academic entrepreneurs over the next 5 to 10 years? Where are the areas of growth, in the university, in terms of where the university is making their investments in terms of research? Is there, and then you're looking at the wider context, obviously in relation to the region that you sit in. Sometimes, are you involved in student placements? Do you want to get involved in executive education? Are you involved in collaborative research? Or to what extent should you, or how does that fit with your overall sort of mission and remit? When I looked at sort of technology transfer offices, certainly in Ireland and also in the UK over 20 years ago, some of them were involved in managing student placement, managing international students. They were a catch-all activity for a lot of external activities for universities. Now, obviously, they're much more refined, narrow scope, narrow focus. And there's other entities in the university that manage some of those, like student placements or supporting students if they're looking at starting up a business. Sometimes that is not always a technology transfer office. That can be in a careers office or some other part, or devolved down to faculties. So I suppose it's just something for you to think about, but it also, I think, is really important when you're looking at your office and you're looking at in terms of the relationships that you're building, and you're looking at your pipeline in your community, that you really have to deploy your resources effectively for. And then I suppose this was maybe I've gone down to the maybe more micro level, coming back up again, and again it's looking at where does the office sit in relation to some of the other activities in your university. So if you look at your strategy in your university around students, there's a very clear infrastructure that has been put in place to support students. Certainly in the UK system and in Europe, there's everything from student registration. Sound is gone, is it? Yeah.
You can... Cecília, vocês estão me ouvindo?
Yes, we can listen very well.
Okay.
Okay, they have a problem with the connection for you?
Yeah,
or
yeah.
Okay.
With...
Well, let me put some, that is so many information that, congratulations, Professor Cunningham.
Professor Cunningham, ele já está ajustando aqui, já teve só um probleminha com o equipamento aqui, mas já está reiniciando já.
Ok.
Ok.
Rodolfo, você poderia até comentar que a gente tem algumas perguntas que ele já até abordou algumas coisas tão interessantes, tá interessante pra caramba.
Estão aguardando. Waiting for.
Não, Humberto, vamos deixar, por isso que eu estou tendo todo cuidado, estou tendo todo cuidado até de tentar resumir, colocando para o chat, até para todo mundo, quem tiver dificuldade de usar o Q&A, mas vamos deixar ele.
Agora já retornou já, foi só o equipamento aqui deu uma desligada, mas já voltou já.
Ok. You can continue, Professor.
Yes. Thank you, and my apologies about this.
It happens sometimes, but it's okay, and you projecting the screen, yeah, okay. Yeah. So nice, Professor. Everything's okay. Yeah, we can continue.
So, as I was saying,
sound, just the sound needs to. Vocês estão ouvindo?
Yes.
Okay.
In this moment now. The microphone
Professor
is closed.
Yeah, we try to adjust the.
Unmute. Yes.
No.
Yes.
We're back.
Now it's okay.
Yes.
Thank
Very
you
good.
very much.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your patience. As I was saying, is that universities have put in an infrastructure that supports students doing their undergraduate degree, postgraduate degree. And the same thing also, I suppose, is what you're seeing is that you're seeing a growth of the infrastructure and architecture that sits behind the third mission activities of a university. So you can see that obviously, the extent to which that is. So you see the technology transfer office here. It looks at in terms of across the stages of entrepreneurship, be it the very latent, where you're thinking about entrepreneurship, you're looking at in terms of the very much the exploitation stage, right through to the exploitation where you maybe launch a business and maybe where you grow. And what you'll find is that sort of technology transfer offices span all of that activity. But also you're seeing is that there are other activities that universities have put in place to support maybe an entrepreneurship agenda or an innovation agenda within a university. So you look at maybe incubators, accelerators, you look at entrepreneurship research centers, you look at maybe science parks. And sometimes I suppose my argument and I suppose what I've seen is that sometimes maybe the Technology Transfer Office is the first organizational unit that a university sets up to address the third mission. And then other activities are either bolted on to the Technology Transfer Office, or they're set up separately from the Technology Transfer Office. And sometimes what you find is that there's a competition, internal competition, between these different units within the university architecture that supports the third mission. So everyone is chasing the same researchers or the same students for activity. So the Technology Transfer Office is looking to work with a researcher maybe for licensing. But at the same time, maybe you have a separate incubator or accelerator that is trying to work with that same researcher. So there's a diffusion of organizational efforts, and that. So I suppose my point here is that you have to see in terms of where your office sits in relation to this wider architecture that you're sort of in your institutional context, and in what way do you should be complementing rather than ending up in a situation where you're competing for activity, because all of these activities have to report impact, have to demonstrate to the university senior management team and externally that they are performing and they are justified in terms of their existence. So looking at, I don't know if I guess this is working. Okay. Is the business model framework. So I appreciate I've covered a lot. So we've looked at the bigger drivers. We've looked at some of the conditions, barriers. We've sort of said to you, look at culture. There's maybe different types of academics. They're not a homogeneous group. And also at a strategic level is to see where your office fits in relation to the university entrepreneurial architecture. So from my perspective, it's I try to, in terms of my research, is to try and offer something practical and useful to help you try and organize or think maybe in a more strategic way around maybe your office now, but also in the future. So this model is a very, it assumes that your core focus is, your core remit is around intellectual property protection. That's why technology transfer offices exist in the first place. Okay, so that's your primary mission in many ways. But your primary mission also extends to other primary missions around transferring that, just rather than intellectual property protection, it is also about exploiting that intellectual property. And the model is a very, I suppose, simple and straightforward one. Is to look at maybe what I would see as maybe 6 core elements, and also in terms of then looking at the wider culture and the research commitment, motivation, and awareness. So I talked about the culture and ethos. So some of that is not in your direct control, and some of it is in relation to how people interact with your office every single day. So what would be their experience of it? And some of it might be in terms of responsiveness. So it might be in terms of how people, researchers experience it, but also other actors or other stakeholders that would deal with, but also in terms of the attitude around commercialization. The research commitment, motivation, and awareness, some of that you have no influence or control over whatsoever. So some of it is innate, intrinsic, certainly from the research that I've done with PIs, is that they have an intrinsic motivation that they want to see their research out in the wider world, be it for economic or societal impact. That is something that individuals have. It can be influenced by maybe university factors, such as, is this a requirement for being an academic or researcher in your institution? Is it valued when it comes to promotion? So when university selection committees are looking at maybe promoting people or academics to more senior positions, do they value technology transfer activity, patents, licenses, as the same way they would value academic journal papers or your scientific output, teaching evaluations, all of those sort of things. But also maybe you can influence that in terms of university policy, but also in terms of the motivation and I suppose that general sort of university awareness around this whole agenda. Things let's look at is your organizational structure. So maybe the structure is something that you've inherited, or it's been like that for a long number of years. But what we're seeing is there's new forms and new ways of organizing technology transfer. Also, where do you sit in relation to the other activities? That are there, are units that are there to support, university industry collaborations. What activities are you going to be involved in? Very clear, and it's very easy for me to say, not from an outsider perspective, but like with anything in strategy, is that you have very clear scope and focus and posture that you have. Because university management will push you to be all things to all people without giving you maybe all the resources to be all things to all people. Okay, so you have to decide, okay, what is it that you are going to do? What is it that you're not going to do in terms of activities and mechanisms? Also, I think it's looking at in terms of the policies and procedures that you have. So how user-friendly are they? How straightforward are they? How accessible are they? All of those sort of things. Because you're trying to balance two things. You're trying to balance, one is protecting and the intellectual property protection for the university. But also when you're exploiting technology, you're also trying to protect the university from any downside risks that they may have in terms of if they are involved in licensing or in relation to maybe have an equity position for a startup business. But also then you're also trying to protect the university in sense of making sure that the university can demonstrate what it is doing in relation to this type of activity. So it's a lot, so it's a very subtle sort of balancing of maybe what is maybe very competing things. And it's a very delicate balance that you have to sort of achieve in terms of doing that. There is the evaluation mechanisms that we all know when you look at technology transfer offices. So how many patents, how many licenses, how many material transfer agreements. You can do measures in terms of full-time equivalent or in terms of people in the office versus activity. You look at all of the big surveys that Autumn does, the Association of University Technology Managers in the US does on technology transfer office performance. You have all of those ones that are easily done and very straightforward. But there are also other evaluation mechanisms now around the social value of technology transfer offices. So think of it, I suppose a lot of this is what the coronavirus has demonstrated is that universities can do a lot of positive things around social impact.
Yeah.
And sometimes universities, certainly in Ireland and other countries, you might have national policies that would say, look, you have to transfer your technology to Irish businesses or to an English firm or to an in-country firm. But also then that maybe sometimes when you're doing that is that there is social implications in terms of exclusivity around licensing deals that maybe marginalizes some potential end users of that at some point in time. So there's this, I think, what you're looking at over the next few years is going to be this very delicate balance that TTOs will have to be able to navigate. So you have the economic imperative around licensing technology, but also you sit that when you look at maybe some of the underpinning research that will inform a lot of the medical areas in science. If you look at cancer research, heart, all of these. You look at even AI at the moment. a lot of the underpinning research, there will be some points in time when it comes to technology transfer where the social good versus the economic good, and sometimes maybe, technology transfer offices will be maybe the first arbiter of that when it comes to shaping sort of research commercialization strategies and the downstream impacts of that. So there's a lot more I can so I've touched on a lot of those different aspects, but to me this is what a model of a technology transfer office is you look at effective organizational structure that meets the here and now needs, but also you're looking forward, very clear on your activities and your mechanisms, looking at evaluation activities. So some of it, particularly from an internal sort of perspective, is you're capturing a lot of data in terms of that in-process activities. So how many researchers have you engaged with? What is the level of that intensity, in terms of that engagement? What is that other, those more softer engagement and evaluation mechanisms that you could use to demonstrate, the real, true, or some of the invisible work that you're involved in as an office? The other last aspect is that I would look at in terms of staffing and resourcing. The reality is, if I talk to any technology transfer office that I've ever talked to in the last 2 decades and a bit, is they'll always tell me they don't have enough resources. Okay? And it's always going to be a big fight to get some more resources from the university. And so sometimes it is about playing a very strong, effective political game. So if you have researchers that are very positive and saying that to senior, to deans, to executive deans, and to senior, that you need to invest more, they can be very strong advocates. If you have industry partners saying that actually, that are very strong advocates and champions of what you do, they can be quite influential in terms of that. Doesn't mean that that'll work, but as part of this larger sort of political game that you need to sort of be mindful of as part of trying to grow and ensure that there's reasonable staffing levels within technology. But also is investing in technology transfer office professionals as well. So looking at what skills that they need to enhance, develop, looking at in terms of maybe future-proofing, looking at in terms of how to get university support to enhance the skills of the people that work in your office and are involved in that, or your own sort of personal development. Sometimes that gets overlooked because the focus is on the here and now and the activities and delivering, rather than saying, okay, in 2 or 3 years' time, do you have the expertise to work with researchers around AI? And it's not AI that are just working on AI, but it's the use of AI in researchers' daily lives in terms of research productivity. What does that mean then in terms of due diligence when you're looking at, lab book, or if you're looking at technology in a lab, or if you're looking at technology or looking at an opportunity in humanities and social sciences? What sort of skills do you need to have beyond your negotiation skills? What sort of market insight skills do you need to develop? How do you expand the building of the ecosystem or developing those market insights that you need to have, so those in your office are better informed to help and support and say, okay, this is where the market opportunity is for to really support researchers. So you're hitting the sweet spot earlier in terms of the market opportunity, rather than burning a lot of energy and activity because you're not sure where that is. How maybe are you working effectively maybe with other TTOs that have maybe specific domain skills maybe that your office doesn't have? So that wider sort of collaboration sort of piece. So finally, looking at some lessons. So my background initially is I come very much from a strategic management background. So I'm all about strategy for in terms of the mission focus, the plan and priorities. Just because you're dependent on others for your success, you also have to very clear in terms of what are your priorities and how you express that, and how you continually express and tell people what is it that you do and what is it that you don't do. Also is that, yes, there's a lot of the daily activity that is looking at facilitating or enabling, but also is looking at the action, is that there's a predominant of trying to move things on. You know, think of the end results that you have to realize. Third thing is look at it in terms of a structure that works. Just because you are structured in such a way that is maybe there's a historic reason for that. Look at, is there a structure that is maybe more effective? Is there a better way of maybe enhancing the skills, or redeploying the existing skills and capabilities within your office? Is there a way that you need to deploy more and invest more in terms of digitalization within your office? Is there ways that you can look at other sectors, such as, let's say, finance, insurance, and others, that are very much in terms of customer contacts at a remote way, okay? That you can learn from them in terms of, because technology transfer is a high contact sport, or a high contact relationship built activity. But some of that is not about physical, you know, that face-to-face. It's about digital. How can you balance that, you know, using digital way to build a relationship with researchers, but also be efficient. Certainly what I've experienced over the years is that, you know, learning from other technology transfer offices and working together is sharing experiences, seeing how things work, seeing, you know, that, yeah, and maybe looking at and that maybe in a national context, but also internationally. So I'm really pleased to be able to share some of my insights today with you, and it's really great, you know, to hear from Rodolfo and all of that in terms of what's happening in your context. But certainly, if I reflect on my experiences in Ireland, where Ireland started off with very little track record in terms of this, but a lot of this sharing of experiences, sharing of practice, working together really makes a difference, both at a national level when you're trying to compete and trying to get this agenda on policymakers, politicians' agenda, but also then at a local level, because then it's just not your office in your university, but it's that wider community that you're part of. What I mean by strong leadership and that is, and it's really difficult, and I you know, talk to lots of technology transfer office directors, but you have to be able to say no, and you have to stand up for the office, maybe when it's not popular thing, or where you're maybe fighting against maybe politically, you know, where there's maybe demands from other parts of the university to do this or that you have to really show very strong leadership, you know, in terms of fighting the corner, you know, of the technology transfer office. But always looking at, you know, getting resources from the university, be it software, be it skill development, around professional development, anything at all, is always looking for resources and planning ahead. So 2 or 3 years' time, you're always looking at in relation to what do you need next year, the year after, and aligning that. So if you're looking at, you know, in terms of how researchers think of the researcher journey from, you know, the first time they talk to you right through to the end point, or what type of relationship. Think of relationship management that you see in wealth management industries. You look at luxury industries and all of that. Is there something like that? Some of those methodologies that you need to adopt in order to have that, you know, sort of that you're realizing some of those priorities, ensuring some of the success, and being more effective and efficient in relation to your deployment. Other things maybe to consider is at operational level, is just simply, as I said at the very start, you know, a lot of people, you know, we're in an attention deficit society. Okay, so we're in the TikTok. Have your TikTok user-friendly IP policies and procedures? Okay, and I'm just thinking of this is the next generation, or maybe current generation, of some of the researchers you're dealing with. Is your disclosure process, is it streamlined? Have you explained it very clearly, so it doesn't become, oh my God, I don't want to be involved in this. This is too much. I don't have the time. I'm under all this pressure. I'm not going to do that. You look at negotiating agreements. You look at your conflicts of interest, IP protocols, all of that. I suppose what we have found in other systems, and you see, is that what industry likes is that if they deal with your university or some other university, it's broadly the same, or it is the same contract, agreements that they have. So it's not a different agreement for University X in comparison to University Y. So when you look at your own context, there are different ways that you can maybe collaborate to maybe reduce some of those frustrations that industry may have. Also, I suppose, is you have to maybe use your political acumen, use your in terms of your own, in terms of where you see in terms of where your office is at, to determine what mechanisms you prioritize. Particularly when you see technology transfer systems at the very start, or offices at the very start, will very justifiably look at prioritizing licensing agreements, because they are, as I said at the start, relatively speaking, in relation to other technology transfer mechanisms, relatively easy to do. Whereas you're looking at a spin out, it takes a lot more resources and all of that to get one of those up and running, or to support it, and then to see that it hopefully will survive, and all of that. Think through also in terms of, well, what are the key measures of your success, but also don't be afraid to add other measures that truly captures the invisible work that you do. Because sometimes it is, if you're arguing for resources or making a business cases for resources within your university, all they see is the hard required measures that you always produce. What they don't see is the contact, all the personal relationship, that high contact activity that you're involved in to realize a performance that you are, or in terms of success that you have. So as to think about that. And is there any other measures that you could use? And lastly is to invest in the professional development of your office.
Sorry to interrupt you. This is Professor James Cunningham, but we are more or less thinking that we will take 1 hour and a half. So how long do you think that you need to?
I've 3 more minutes, so you're okay.
Oh, okay, great.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
So
it's okay. It's
you're
only to.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Yeah.
Yes, it's only for the organization. Thank you very much.
That's very much. Yeah. Here, one thing I would say to you always with your office is always share the successes that you have wide and far. Talk about your success. Talk about the success around licensing, technology, all the aspects of technology transfer. See if you can influence, obviously, some of the reward systems within your university for this. But as possible, around, if I would say, is dress your university campus around technology transfer. So notice boards, digital infrastructure that is very visible. That technology transfer office is very visible. Secondly, is looking at in terms of trying to influence the researcher motivation piece. Okay, so look at in terms of how you can influence the policies around research commercialization, and also looking at sometimes you advocating around technology transfer helps those at a disciplinary level who want to do this, that this is okay to do. Okay, so you're helping people who are maybe the silent majority that are afraid or maybe reluctant to do that. But by you advocating as an office in terms of maybe changing university policy and procedures, that can be really helpful and very, very powerful. Third thing is I have a very practical toolkit that you can actually give researchers in terms of just starting in relation to their collaboration. So when they're looking at maybe working with an industry partner, or you can very much take that, replicate it, do whatever you want, but maybe just give them practical tools that they can use when they're looking at collaborations with industry. Third thing is looking at being very strategic and proactive. Just because you're reliant on others for your performance, you can be very reactive and say, oh, I can't do much. It is around actually being very proactive and being very strategic. Clear about your mission, clear about your focus and what you do. Secondly is, I can't emphasize enough, is an activity like today and other activities is you learn from each other. Sharing your experiences is so critically important at a national level. And some places and some institutions are more advanced, some aren't. But even though, I think there's a lot, and in my experience from talking to technology transfer offices and professionals, learning from each other is so vital, because there's a soft, invisible aspects of what you do is really, really important in terms of realizing the hard impacts that you're trying to do. Secondly, or thirdly, is about being very entrepreneurial in your own thinking and open in terms of mindset. You see good practice somewhere else, why not try and experiment and do it in your office? What is actually stopping you from doing that? Is it yourselves? Is it the risk of failure, or whatever it is? Last thing, I suppose, what I would also share with you is also dealing with learning from the success. So every time you have a successful technology transfer activity, learn from it and say, okay, was there anything else that we can do more effectively, more efficiently? Who was involved? Similarly, when maybe negotiations fail and it doesn't work out, are there things that you can learn from that? So you codify and you talk about openly about the success and failure and all of that. And it's not to sort of hide away and all that, because there is a lot of technology transfer failure that we don't talk about. A lot of licenses that never that you can register patents, but are never licensed out to a company. So why is that the case? Is it due to market failure? Is it due what are the factors that lead to that? Sometimes also is that university leaders will put you under lots of pressure to deliver quickly, hard and fast. You have to push back and say, technology transfer is a long-term game. It's not, this is like building a system, that is sustainable. It is not a transactional system. It is a system that's based on sustainability, and you have to build resilience into the system. And it isn't always just a technology transfer office. It's the whole university ecosystem that supports that. And lastly, I'm very much, going back to Champion Norai, talk about ambition. So they talk about the ambition as the root of all achievement. Ambition is the spirit of success, of striving for something worth achieving. And the challenge that I would leave you with is your postcard from the future. So in 5 years' time, or the day that you leave your technology transfer office or your activity, what would your postcard say? What was the ambition that you have now? And what would your postcard say in the future in relation to what is it that you have achieved? So you think of the last postcard today, you think of in the future, and say, okay, well, what is it that I've achieved in our technology transfer office that's worth achieving? So what would be the highlighted, what would be the things that you say, okay, yeah, that is what the last X number of years has been about in that postcard. So that is your postcard from the future. So thanks very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Cunningham. Thank you very much, Rodolfo. I was prepared for plenty of questions, and you have already answered so many of them. I would like only to point some very important, because Elton is from my second boss is here, so I would like only to talk about the impact, the new challenge for this technology transfer office that you mentioned. Well, unfortunately, we have here with us Incapel is another TTO, but is related to agriculture, technical assistance and something like that. They work very hard, and they make frequently reports about the impacts, social impact, economic impact for the region. So, but we have a challenge that is bigger than that, because the Global Innovation Index that we have as a reference, they have only this kind of innovation indicators, technology transfer as patents indicators, but not they don't use this kind of social impact or economic impact. And that is really a challenge. And another thing that is very good here in Brazil, that the last year, the IP of National Office, INPI in Portuguese, they launched this kind of index of development index, like Global Innovation Index, but with a regional aspect. That is very important for us because we can see this little point that we can improve and work for a medium term and long term more easier. So I'm very happy that all your the material that you have presented today and the discussion very special for us, and I think I will open for Rodolfo mention something, or maybe for Elton to talk a little bit, but I invite you to see some questions that the people have done in the QA. I will send you all the questions for you also. And please, Elton, if you want to talk a little bit, or Rodolfo.
No, for me, it's good. For me, we can prioritize the question and answer, the people, and Professor Elton for me, it's okay.
I just have to thank you, Mr. Cunningham, for the outstanding lecture you shared with us. And I personally 100% agree with your concluding thoughts. It's very hard to put in action. And I know that I will spend all afternoon in Brazil listening to you and start some discussions. But I think that on behalf of everyone here, Mr. James, thank you very much for sharing your expertise and contributing to the strengthening of connections between our innovative ecosystems. And maybe we will contact you in a near future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yep, very much appreciate the opportunity, and yeah, good. And yeah, I think it's no matter where you are in the world, I think this technology transfer is very it's challenging, and we all face the same policy challenges. But I suppose, and we can always, and you're seeing there's more and more measurements coming out of technology transfer activities and that. And I think what you're going to see at some of these global indexes, that they're going to reflect some of the social impacts as well. And you can also, and again, these can be a double-edged sword. So sometimes you can use them to justify why you need more resources or why things need to change, and all of that. But it's not to be maybe down, because again, you look at the Irish system, and just reflecting on a small country example, you can be very, and I remember talking to some directors and people involved, and you can be very disheartened sometimes because, you look at other countries seem to be going further and further, and where is that? But I think sometimes you have to look at this this is a long-term game and a long-term project when it comes to sort of university technology transfer. I go back to the old saying that Rome wasn't built in a day, that it is a very much, could be take decades and decades to build a very robust technology transfer system. Yeah. So some questions there. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, we have plenty of questions.
Okay, so yeah. So
well,
yeah. So I don't know what way you want me, do you want me to go through them, and I can have a...
Yeah, we have plenty of questions. Some of them have already answered. But, for example, they have Franco Baresi. He's a master's student, and he makes a question about the methods of valuation that you have mentioned. What are the most, what are this kind of tools or valuation that you do to see exactly if it's worth to do a technology transfer or not? It's not only question to have a patent, for example, but you need to do a valuation.
Okay.
What kind of valuation?
I know. Yep. Good. Really good question. So I suppose what I've seen here in the if I look at the UK and sort of European experiences, is sometimes this is an autonomous decision by a technology transfer office to whether they will look at further, whether they'll register a patent for a particular technology. So they will look at the maybe market opportunity. They will look at, in terms of their patent portfolio that they have, they will look at the resources, all of those type of things. Other institutions will operate sort of a university committee. So a university committee would meet very regularly, and that would consist of the technology transfer office, some external experts, maybe industry experts, and also some maybe faculty or people drawn from the university. And it's more of a sort of a committee system that is used to determine in terms of whether the university is going to invest in let's say registering a patent or whatever it is. In the UK system and also in European systems, you have very standard ways, a bit like what you described, Cecilia, at the very start. They're just in terms of this part of the session, there's just standard metrics. So in the UK, we have a higher education business survey that captures a lot of these metrics, and every year it's reported on. And there was just a recent report there last year in the UK on the performance of universities when it comes to spin-outs and technology transfer. And it uses lots of different metrics around the size of the office, looks at types of engagement, all of those. And I'm very happy to share that with Fran. Very happy to share that. So if whoever has asked that question, they can email me, and I'm happy to share whatever information I have. Okay.
Okay. So they have another question of Jose Aires from Caper. I will go directly to the point. So at Newcastle University, do you have you any information on how many technology were generated in the academia and how many were effectively used and applied by target audience? I think they are talking about rural extension, this kind of target audience.
Okay. Yeah. So in our university, like in other universities in the UK, they have to report annually every year what they do in terms of their licenses, spin-outs, startups, looking at the software engagement with industry. So you might have industry events, how industry sponsors university activity and that. In our university, we have a National Innovation Centre for the Rural Economy, which is funded by UKRI. And they're involved in a lot of different projects to do with trying to increase the innovation capacity, a bit like what you're describing there in terms of that rural extension type activities. So it's looking at, so they have commissioned reports, they have implemented some demonstrator sort of projects. Some of universities are involved in incubation is very much focused around the rural economy. And I'm very happy to share that. And I've actually recently written up a chapter on all of that activity with some colleagues at that National Innovation Centre for the Rural Economy that details what's involved. And if you email me, I'm very happy to share that chapter with you. And if there's any other information as well, so you get a sense of that. In the UK, unlike in Ireland and then also in other European countries, you have universities that have maybe more dedicated to looking at rural areas. So they'll provide veterinary services and facilities. They'll obviously provide degrees and on the teaching mission. And also they're involved in research to do with agriculture, but also maybe some of the services business around agriculture. Some of them then would work with national agencies that are involved in working with farmers in terms of putting together demonstrator type products on farms to do with crop production, dairy farming, all of that. And then what you would see in the European system, and certainly in the UK, then you'll have dedicated funding that goes into the rural sort of context, but is very much driven out of science areas. Like, if I look at AI, so that you'll have a funding pot broadly around AI, and some of it is then deployed into AI to do with agriculture or rural economy or broadband or whatever that is. Yeah.
Great.
Okay. They have another question of the Professor Newton from UFES, is how the relationship is handled in terms of the power of the industrial partner. It's very specific.
Okay, no, that's and that is a very difficult one. Okay, so how do universities handle that power? So sometimes universities will enter large collaborative agreements with a large multinational firm. So they'll say, okay, we'll do an agreement around a research program. We'll do it for student placement. We'll do it for other type of activities. So it's that large sort of agreement. So it's multi-annual. So if you look at, let's say, Microsoft, IBM, big players like that, you'll see that they'll have these big, large cooperative sort of programs with universities that they would select. Other ways that universities will do is that they will maybe try and dilute, because a lot of maybe certainly in the European context, and I know what it's like in Brazil, is that a lot of funding now requires multiple industry partners coming together to around a particular area. So you'll have, let's say, a lot of firms in a similar industry working together, putting some money and resources with a university partner to address a problem. So that can dilute the power of some industry partners, but also then it needs upfront very clear rules of engagement around IP exploitation. So if something is discovered, who's first dibs or who has the first call on that type of technology. So what you see is these broad master collaborative type agreements where all of that IP agreements and things are set up front. And sometimes it is really difficult, even with those mechanisms, because again, to sort of, I suppose, not to curb, but to make sure that there's equity in terms of with the industry university collaboration. So remember, universities need universities, because universities are at the forefront of knowledge development. But the way it is maybe positioned in reality is that universities will maybe sometimes be very dismissive of what universities do, because it's in their self-interest to do that, because they want to maybe in terms of to look after their own self-interest, if that's the way to put it. So and sometimes maybe universities have to be prepared to walk away and say, no, we're not to do maybe working with this industry or this company for whatever reasons. Yeah. But that is easier said than done. I have to caveat that as well. Yeah. Yeah.
So thank you very much, Professor James Cunningham. And Rodolfo is quite close to you.
Yeah.
I appreciated very much your presentation, and I would like to have more time with you in another occasion. That really is excellent material. And and I put in the chat an email if you want to send any question and to address for us. Is a official email from FAPES, and the last word I will put for Elton, that is finishing. Elton, if you want to say something.
Yes, so I said before, but again, thank you, Mr. Professor Cunningham, for your excellent presentation. And as I said, maybe we'll contact you to explore more information, who knows, some kind of partnership or something else, but we will make contact. Thank you.
Okay, Rodolfo, your last words. Thank you very much for this opportunity also.
Yeah, thank you
Yes.
very much, everybody here with us. And Professor Cunningham, we appreciate your experience, your sharing with us, because it's so interesting, because there is, even here in UK, we have a mature innovation ecosystem, but there is a lot of things similar to the challenges with NITs in Brazil, the TTOs in Brazil, us NITs. So it's for us, this experience, to share this experience, to understand how we can adapt it for Brazil, some things. It's amazing. And thank you. We appreciate very, very much your attention, your time, your experience here with us. And thank you, Cecilia, for this moment. And we can try another moment like that. And thanks everybody. Thank you, FAPES. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you everybody. Have a nice day. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
We keep in touch.
Okay.